So the Torah begins with describing Noach. Noach was an Ish Tzaddik Tamim. Noach was called a tzaddik in the Torah. We know there are many righteous people. We don't know who they are. In the tradition, 36 righteous people every generation. But it's much harder to know who a tzaddik is. Let's say you have different types of great people in terms of, let's say, rabbis or role models. Either they're usually Talmidei Chachamim, they're usually Torah scholars. That's why they become, or they're known for their sitkis, their righteousness. And it's much easier to determine who's a Torah scholar because you could listen to a class, you could ask them questions. There's more some objective standards. Of course, people could be fooled as well, but at least there's some objective standard. When it comes to righteousness, what does that mean anyway? You're righteous. It means something different to everyone. If you have a general idea, it means to be good, but what righteous means exactly, I'm sure we could go around the room and come up with different definitions. So Noach is one of the few people who are called in the Torah a tzaddik. There are many tzaddikim throughout Jewish history. We have them all the time, but it's a rare case where the Torah itself calls someone a tzaddik. There's only one other place the Torah doesn't call this person a tzaddik, but he's mentioned a tzaddik. Who's the other person besides Noach who's called tzaddik, or he's known as tzaddik? I give what?
Yes, sir.
Very good. And I just picked up on it because when I was Noach Yosef, that's his middle name. So I told him that's why he was named. And afterwards, so Noach and Yosef, those are the only people who are labeled tzaddikim. One in the Torah book, Joseph is called Yosef HaTzaddik. What does Yosef and Noach have in common? Why are only the two of them labeled tzaddikim? So the Das Zikanim of Balitosis, one of the Balitosis points out, the reason is because what did they have in common? They both sustained the world. In the case of Noach, as we will read this week, the world was destroyed, they built the ark, and he came out of the ark and rebuilt the whole world. That's Noach. And we find by Yosef, not to the same extreme, but the same result, the 7 years of plenty or the 7 years of famine. You know, we should know we don't know what it means to have a famine, not to have food, but obviously Yosef, b'chachmaso, realized he put the food away. He not only saved Egypt, he saved the whole world. Everyone came down. So Yosef and Noach have in common that it's called tzaddikim because they sustained the whole world. How do we know that someone who sustains the whole world is considered a tzaddik? Where do we get that from? So I'll give you a hint. We say it 3 times a day in davening. How do we know that someone who sustains the world is called a tzaddik? So we say in Ashrei, we're talking about God, of course. God, you open your hands and you sustain you sustain the whole world. And what's the next pasuk? Tzaddik Hashem b'chol, God, you're a tzaddik. So we see from here that just like God sustains the world, he's called a tzaddik. Any individual who sustains the whole world, they're labeled a tzaddik. And hence Noach and Yosef, the common denominator is they sustain the whole world. Of course, most of us don't have that opportunity per se to save a whole world. So therefore, that's an extreme case where you're in a very, very extreme and tragic situation. The world's being destroyed as a famine. So in those extreme cases, but obviously all of us in our own ways, you could sustain the whole world, not literally and not physically the whole world. But as the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, why did God create one person? Why did he create Adam? I mean, why did he create the world with only one? Why did he create 6 million Jews, 12 million, 50 million people? Why did he always create the world with one? To teach us that both lessons. One who murders one person, it's like you destroyed the whole world. One human life is of infinite value. And similarly, you save one person, you save, whether spiritually, physically, you go ahead and you consider saving the whole world. So that was the act of chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did. And as the Gemara tells us in Sukkah, that the Gemara contrasts the mitzvah of tzedakah with the mitzvah of chesed. That the Gemara says in different ways, I think it says in 3 ways, Gedol chesed mi tzedakah. In 3 ways, the mitzvah of doing acts of loving kindness is greater than the mitzvah of tzedakah. What are the three ways? Chesed could be done to the living and to the poor, living and to the dead. But doing tzedakah, you can't do tzedakah to the dead. You only can help out tzedakah is to the living. So tzedakah is with money, chesed is with bodily exertion. And tzedakah is only to the poor. Chesed you can do both to the rich and to the poor. So the Gemara tells us, definitely in scope, and certainly quantitatively, we see that chesed is much more broader than tzedakah. But the Maharal explains it's not just quantitative, but it's qualitative. There's a fundamental difference between the mitzvah of chesed and the mitzvah of tzedakah. Where it originates from. What's tzedakah? Tzedakah, either you're walking down the street and a beggar comes to you, or you get a phone call, or modern technology, you get an email, a text, whatever the case may be. You're not planning on giving tzedakah, meaning at the moment, in theory, you plan on giving, and in a general sense, and someone says, you know what, there's a great, people need money for this event, for Johnny's Pesach thing, collecting money, whatever. Everyone has their own things, they collect for, and there's no shortage of good things to give tzedakah to. But where does it come from? It originates from the need. Like someone came to me, asked me, I said, and you're a nice person. Okay, great, yeah, tell me how I can help. But it didn't come from you. It came from an external factor, whoever it was, email, a person. However, chesed is just the opposite. Chesed is inherent, internal. That basically you have a tremendous desire to do a good deed. And the question is, how are you going to have the release? Who are you going to do a good deed to? A, B, C, D, E, F, and whoever you... How do we know that's true? Because we're going to read it in about 2 weeks, Parashat Vayera, the beginning of the Parsha, when Avram was recovering from the circumcision, major surgery, at 100, etc. So God made it very hot so no one would come by. But Avram was having more stress, so God sent 3 angels dressed up as people to come and visit. So, and we know Avram went out, he ran, he got the food, or him and Sarah, they got the food and water. So we all know angels don't eat. So who was God doing this for? Clearly, he set up the whole scenario for Avram's sake. Avram had a strong desire to do chesed, and he couldn't do it because no one was there, so God set up a scenario. The angels don't benefit, so we see the essence of chesed is from you. I suppose because there's 2 aspects. The classical case of tzedakah in general is more result-oriented. In other words, let's say you're walking down the street, you're going pocketbook, you pay whatever, you take out your iPhone, and you drop a $20 bill without unbeknownst to you, and what do you know? Your lucky day, a poor person picks it up. So, do you get the mitzvah of tzedakah? So Chazal tell us, one gets the mitzvah of tzedakah. If you drop money, you don't know it, or some other means, and an ani benefit, you get the mitzvah of tzedakah. So we see, but tzedakah is much more result-oriented. Did you help the person or not? In fact, that's why there's a famous kasha of the Rashba, the Rishonim. Tzedakah is a mitzvah min HaTorah. It's clearly a biblical mitzvah. So what do we usually do before we do mitzvahs? We usually make brachas before we do mitzvahs. We usually do them over l'asiyasim. First we make the bracha, then we do the mitzvah. So the question is, where is the bracha regarding the mitzvah of tzedakah? So there are many answers. We'll maybe discuss at future dates. But the one relevant here is that the Rashba points out, you know why you don't make a bracha? Because it doesn't happen that often, but the poor person won't take it. As let's say you make the bracha, mitzvah tzedakah, and the poor, you have cases people, let's say the person, either you get it 2 ways you get them, some are positive, some are negative. A guy comes to your door and says he's collecting, let's say you want to give him $20, you kidding me? He throws it back to you, I need 100, I'm just making it up. So obviously in that case, so he's not taking it, he'll probably end up taking it at the end, but it could be a potential bracha of atala. Or the other person he doesn't ask, that person needs, but he doesn't want to ask, and you go ahead and you plan on giving, but he doesn't want to take it. So for the bracha part, it wouldn't make a difference. One's more of a positive way, not taking, one's a negative way. But the point being is, since the poor person might not take it, so you can't make a bracha. So what do we see from this Rashba? That the mitzvah of tzedakah is the result. If it's the giving, then what's the difference? I can make a bracha, I'm giving you tzedakah, whether you take it, it's your problem or not. And in fact, so that's why, that's one of the reasons why we don't have a bracha on tzedakah, and that's why when they go around in shul and you're given the pushka, there's no bracha. Besides that, there's no bracha, there's no mitzvah. The mitzvah is when the poor person gets it. You put money in the pushka, nothing's happening yet. It's only when the shul, they take the money and they get together and they bring it to somewhere. That's the whole question, whether you put money in the pushka, it's stolen, whether you get the mitzvah of tzedakah or not. So technically speaking, you probably don't. But as always, this is we have a principle, machshava tova mitzvah, if a good thought combines for a good deed. So certainly in this case you did an action, so God will give you credit for it, but technically speaking, you didn't fulfill your mitzvah of tzedakah.
So when you get those emails from Chabad, like right before Yom Kippur, saying donate money before Yom Kippur, like sort of thing, then you should ask them whether or not they're going to have an opportunity to give this money away before Yom Kippur, or else it's useless to you.
No, right, so I wouldn't say it's useless. Number one, but anytime you make a PL or Yiskard, I mean, depends when you want the money. I mean, it depends. Right, if you want the mitzvah of tzedakah, right, you're asking technically speaking, if you want the mitzvah, if you want the mitzvah tzedakah to count to save you, because tzedakah counts to be mavis, and right, then it's important that they take the money and use it. But if they take the money and they're going to spend it, they have to get. That's a general issue during those days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because there's an interesting Rambam. The Rambam, based on the Gemara gives us like the picture of a scale. Like people have mitzvahs and averos, and we basically view ourselves as in the middle. Righteous get written up for life right away, wicked get written up for death in the middle. And we assume we're all in the middle. And one mitzvah is going to tilt the scale. But the Rambam writes something interesting. He just writes, if you do tshuva during the 10 days of tshuva, then you'll be written up for good. But if not, no. So the question is, why is the Rambam limited to tshuva? Let's say I want to give tzedakah, I'll daven, I'll do chesed. Why is the Rambam only say imasa tshuva? So again, many answers to the question, but what the answer will do is because when we started this year, Rosh Hashanah, so now we're in the next year already. So therefore, any mitzvahs you do this year, they're going to count, but they're going to count for next year. For next year's Rosh Hashanah, it's not going to help you for this year. Tshuva is the only one that has the ability to retroactively change any. There's two ways of balancing the scale. So either you could get more mitzvahs, you could take away the averos. So tshuva has the ability to retroactively take away averos. And also, if you do tshuva, then tshuva could be part of the scale. But that's right. So technically speaking, if you wanted that, but practically speaking, as long as the money gets there, it's not going to make that much of a practical difference.
But is it like first in, first out, or like last in, first out? So say, for example...
LIFO or FIFO.
That's right.
Yeah, it took accounting.
No, seriously, so say, for example, that's exactly... So say bank puts in $100. So for those of us who didn't take accounting, someone explained this to me, but LIFO, FIFO. Anyway, so bank puts in $100, and then someone spends $50, and then I put in $50, and they, which $50 gets spent first? Like, who gets the mitzvah first? Like,
no,
so I put in $50, he puts in $50, but he put in first, and then they spend. Does mine get first?
No, so it's different. And one is, let's say you're giving to, let's assume A, so there's two different points. Once they take the donation, that's your mitzvah. You're leaving it them. If you're giving it to A, you're leaving them to decide what they want to use it on.
Oh, so they have, but they're not aniyim.
No, so you're right.
That's not tzedakah, technically. That's
again, no, so right. So technically speaking, real tzedakah is to an ani. But people use the term loosely. So tzedakah we mean giving to the shul. It basically counts as meiser money. But right, strictly speaking, it's not real tzedakah. Functionally speaking, we'll get credit for it. But right, strictly speaking, tzedakah is really to poor people who need it, not to institutions. But you have to give. If you didn't have institutions, you couldn't survive either. So you have to,
but that's right. So it would be more meiser, like maintaining your institution.
So once they accepted, whether they got into however it works, once they do it on the visa, they so then your mitzvah is finished with. If you want to earmark it for something, so then maybe it's different. So then maybe then you say, I want to give it for this, so then maybe until they use it, then technically speaking, but from that's out of your hands. So the bottom line is, once you give the money, you're doing all you can do anyway. It's not really, won't be your issue because you're going to get rewarded. It's up to them to make sure, they give it in a way. But that's...
Do you feel a bracha over direct charity? So if you volunteer on Ve'ahavta, let's say, if you go out on a truck and you directly, personally help somebody else.
Right. So why do it's the symbol? So why don't we make a bracha before you go Ve'ahavta? You go Bikar Cholim in the hospital, or you help someone across the street. So it's a general question, which could be another topic. Why don't we make a bracha? So I'll just give you the Rambam's answer, because the Rambam's opinion is, in Hilchos Brachas, he says, we only find brachas in two categories of commandments. Commandments ben Adam l'makom, commandments between man and God, and ben Adam l'chaveiro, interpersonal. So he says we only find that our rabbis instituted brachas on commandments between man and God. Commandments between people, Chazal never instituted a bracha. The question is, why not? Why do we, if they're equally important? That's the two tablets. The first tablet for Yom Makom, and the second 5 are. But so why no bracha? So that's what they explain in the Rambam. I'll give an example. That imagine someone comes to your door, and a poor person. They're asking for food. They're real money, and there's a whole discussion in priority of tzedakah. The Gemara gives an example. Someone comes to your door. They have no clothes, or they have no food. It gets into who goes first, etc. That's a separate priority in tzedakah. But in general, so okay, great. You run into the kitchen, you get the food, you take out the ribs, the fries, whatever, the vegetables, and this 1 second, Baruch Atah, you have a lot of kavanah when someone else is waiting, and then the time you finish the bracha, the guy faints, or the lady faints. The point being is, Chazal didn't institute brachas on something which could interfere with the mitzvah. When it comes to mitzvah with God, God can wait all night. He has no needs. But the person is trying to help, let me go save your life. Wait a second, let me make the bracha. And the guy would. So we don't want to do anything that's going to interrupt you. So it doesn't make any sense to set up a bracha. That's going to interfere. The whole purpose of the mitzvah is to help the other person. So that's why there's no bracha in general on the category of mitzvahs b'nam chavero. So we know that there's always so there's the difference between chesed and tzedakah. But as well as a general, there's always, as we know, as the Rambam writes, it's always important. The middle road is always the golden path is the middle road. The Shvil Hazav, he calls it. That all extremes are bad. Even good things. That's what all extremists are. What they do is they focus on one good point, and it is a good point. They just ignore everything else. So that's what an extremist means. You focus on a good thing, but you ignore everyone else. So all extremes are bad. The Rambam writes, the only time you should do an extreme if you have a sickness. So he gives an example with a reed. You have a reed bent a little to the left, and you want to move it all the way, you want to get it back to the middle. So the Rambam writes, when you move it back to the middle, it's going to eventually go back to the left. So you have to move it all the way to the right, not too much, but you'll break it. And then eventually you'll go back to the middle. In other words, if you have a sickness, you have to go to the other extreme temporarily to get back to the middle. The goal is always to be in the middle. And that's why they point out, and so therefore it's like someone saying, someone's sick, they have an infection, they have to take antibiotic, or whatever the case is, medication, cholesterol, whatever it is. And so someone will say, this person's sick and has an illness, and look, you took this medicine, and look how great that person feels. I'm feeling great. Imagine how good I'll feel if I take this medication. That's not the way it works. If you have a deficiency, you need the medicine to fill it up. If you don't have the deficiency, at best it will be neutral, it might even hurt you. So the Rambam writes, all extremes are bad, but if you're sick, then you got to get better. But once you get better, you go back. And as the Salvation points out, it doesn't mean on every issue there is in life I have to be in the middle. You have a right to be passionate about different issues. Everyone has their own feelings, what to do for chesed, what to do for tzedakah, for learning, whatever the case may be. But in the big picture, you got to be somewhere in the middle. It doesn't mean on each specific thing you do. So, for instance, they point out we just celebrated Sukkot not too long ago. We're familiar with the hadassim still, the myrtles on the 4 species. So that for the hadas to be kosher, see today, now they come in, these are the pros of con of living in a commercial world. That in terms of, even the lulav now comes with the hashgacha. Basically, you can just walk in the store, just spend the money, and then 30 seconds later, you could come out with which is, positive, you don't have to spend a lot of time. On the other hand, back in the day, and it's still in Israel, you used to actually spend time, let's go look, and if in terms of chinuch for the children, they see you, and in general, it's not just this, let's say shalach manis, it used to be you spend a lot of time, you look as a kid making, and people to do, but then today, again, you have commercial, the shul will make one big, so I'm not, ultimately probably it's better that we have the modern technology, but at this point, you have to realize you got to make up the chinuch and other matters that the kids see you actually doing something, because today everything is so automatic, things that you take for granted, your kids don't even know, they're not going to know it's important. If they ever see you doing chesed, they're not going to know that, chesed is important to you, so etc. So they point out that you have to be meshulish. To be kosher, they have to have all 3 grow from the same area. So the Gemara is a very strange expression. The Gemara says a hadas, which isn't meshulish, it's a hadas shota. It's a psychotic, it's a wacko hadas, and it's not kosher. So Rav Selevan says it's a strange word. What's the pshat? So Rashi gives a reason why it's called a hadas shota, but what kind of, to say it's not kosher, what do you mean it's a crazy, psychology, right? A psychotic, this is Rabbi explains, because this is by children. Al pi halacha, obviously someone 10, 11, 12, they have a level of knowledge, but halachically, legally speaking, a boy under 13 and a girl under 12 are la b'nei das. They're not considered someone with das. So what's the pshat? So it's more talking about younger kids, but we know you see it with little kids, grandkids, or other people's kids, that when the kids are happy, they're playing with the blocks, the Barbie, the dolls, or whatever. It doesn't make a difference what happened 15 minutes ago, they're in total 100% happiness. And simply the reverse. 15 minutes later, they're having a tantrum because for kids, that's what it means. Rabbi does is they have no balance. That's what an adult's supposed to have balance. Balance is you don't get you don't go out of control on the happy events in life. You don't go out of control on the negative events. Obviously, the different extremes, like Noach, even though he was wrong, but at least the whole world being destroyed. So Noach went crazy and he drank, and I'm not judging any Holocaust survivors. Extreme cases are, but obviously in a normal fashion of life, that you're going to have, hopefully in a normal range, you're going to have happy events, sad events, and of course you're going to be happy when but you have to have it within the total picture. It's not like ignore all the good that happened today because of one thing in the reverse. Yeah, that's what adults are supposed to have, be mature and have a balance. So a hadas shot is a hadas, that's why it's psychotic, it's in balance, it's not good. If someone doesn't have balance, can't function in life. And with that we can understand another Mishnah. It says there's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah during Sukkot. However, you don't have to eat everything in the sukkah. You basically, chips, drinks, jelly beans, that's considered achilas arai. That's not, if you're having bread and cake, you basically have to eat in the sukkah and make a leishia b'sukkah, but if not, you can eat in the house. However, it's praiseworthy to eat everything in the sukkah, if you can, even to drink a cup of water. So the Mishnah Gemara tells the story of 2 rabbis. One rabbi, when he was offered the chips and the water, said, bring it into the sukkah. Another rabbi ate it in the house and didn't. So the Gemara illustrates this halacha, and that's true in Judaism throughout. In Judaism, you have a baseline halacha, the pure what the halacha is, and then a person has the right to be strict if the way. You have to know what. The problem is many people don't know what the baseline halacha is. A lot of people think the chumrah is the halacha, then they have problems. You don't know when to be machmir, when not to. But a lot of details. There's always a baseline halacha, and then if you want to do extra, great. So the Gemara gives an example of this idea by different rabbis. Some rabbis chose to be strict, and it's both acceptable viewpoints in Judaism. As always, we have many different views all within the box. They're all acceptable. We don't. It's very dynamic. We don't. It's not just one point of view and that's it. So it's interesting. These rabbis who were the rabbis gave the example of Yochanan ben Zakkai, others are rabbis that are prominent rabbis during the Churban Bayesheni. These are rabbis that were affected during the destruction in the Second Temple. In fact, one of the rabbis, he fasted 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. He wanted to try to prevent the destruction by fasting. Another rabbi, they didn't fast. So it's interesting to note that the different rabbis that, let's say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when it came to eating in the sukkah, he was very strict. Yet when it came to fasting 40 years before that, he wasn't strict on. And the opposite, the one who was strict by sukkah was lenient by, the one who was lenient by sukkah was strict. So what do we see? That perhaps one of the ideas is that the Mishnah is telling me is the concept of balance. As we said, the Rambam said the Shvil Hazav, the golden path is the middle path. So therefore, that's the Gemara is giving examples that certain areas you're going to be, a person shouldn't be lenient. It says, the Gemara says you can't follow. A person can't take all the kulas, the leniencies of one, and similarly, if you take the chumras of everyone, you're a fool walking in the darkness. In other words, you can't, not that you're picking yourself, whoever you pick, a Rabbi, your mentor, whoever it is, but basically it's not a matter of just picking every strict one. There has to be a balance. So, if you feel strongly about this area, you might want to be, the sukkah, I feel strong to eat everything, I'm going to sleep in the sukkah, but other area owners have to be strict on every area. It's all part of the middle road. That's what the Mishnah is coming to teach us, the concept of balance. And perhaps one other idea as well is that the Mishnah is coming to teach us what was the cause of Churban Bayesheni, what caused the destruction. We know the Gemara tells us in Yuma that for the first temple, the big three, Jews were involved in illicit relations, idol worship, and murder. That caused the destruction of the first temple. The Gemara says, what caused the destruction of the second temple? Sinas Chinam, unwarranted hatred. And as Rav Kook always points out, so before I get to Rav Kook, so which one's worse? The big three or Sinas Chinam? So obviously we would say the big three, but if we look at the history, it seems the opposite. What do I mean? That Sinas Chinam is the worst, because how long did it take to rebuild the first temple? Meaning to rebuild the second one, it took 70 years. After 70 years, they knew they were going to rebuild it. So it only took 7 years for God to forgive them for the 3 cardinal sins. Yet we're still waiting today on Sinas Chinam. That right, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and as Rav Kook pointed out, if Sinas Chinam was the cause, then obviously we have a sickness, as the Rambam says. If you have a sickness, then you're allowed to go to the other extreme. Avas Chinam. And to love someone for no other reason than he's a human being. And that's why, in fact, it's interesting, Sinas Chinam. People think, what Sinas Chinam means? You know what? I hate this person, I have no reason, I don't even know you, but I don't like the way you look, I'm going to hate. That's not Sinas Chinam, that's a person that just needs help. That's the psychotic stroke. A person just hates someone for no reason, there's something wrong with you. No, Chazal, someone did something to you, you have good reason to hate them, but that reason's not enough. Meaning, not good reason to hate them, they did something wrong, but it's not a reason to hate someone, you still have to work out the relationship. So you have to go to the opposite extreme. So that's what the cause of the destruction of the second temple was, that as the Netziv writes, that people had strong opinions about different halachas and that. They didn't accept anyone. They just followed. They only knew what their Rabbi said, and that was it. Whoever didn't do, it's either my way or the highway. That was one of the causes of Sinas Chinam. Like, what do you mean you're doing this? My Rabbi said, yeah, but my Rabbi, who cares what your Rabbi has to say? My Rabbi's right. This is the one, and that was one of the causes of the root. So perhaps that's what the Mishnah is getting us here. The Mishnah is telling us there's the halacha. You could drink the water and eat the chips. You have an option. Al pi halacha, they're both accepted. Nothing wrong. In other words, if someone decides to eat everything in the sukkah, he's not, he's not too frum. There's nothing wrong with it. And similarly, if someone wants to drink the water in the house, he's not too modern or too liberal. In other words, we have to get away from, people. If you're not doing what I'm doing, either you're not strict enough. Both are totally acceptable in halacha. And the Mishnah gives an example of two rabbis who both did the same thing. And again, you can't look at things in a vacuum. It's the big picture. You don't necessarily take every leniency throughout life. There's a balance, and you have to work through, obviously different stages of life or whatever is going on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That balance is still within the scope of halachic observance. So it's right. So what you're saying is you could be makil or you could be machmir, but it's still within the scope of a commitment to halacha in all areas of your life. It's not like saying I'm going to have a balance by being committed to some halacha, but not being committed to other areas of halacha, and that's how I'm going to create a balance. You're saying what would you say in terms of that? In terms of
100% right. Because that's not right. Within, let's say,
pork during the week, shaitel on Shabbos.
Like I've been saying, right? Or like someone does. Obviously, everyone has the option of free choice. But I'm saying I don't have the option of eating a meal with bread inside my house. That's not obviously I don't know if it's or whatever the case. I don't have a choice to desecrate Shabbos. I do have a choice. But I'm saying in terms of the balance, we're talking about because else. Or else then that turns into another mitzvah of tochacha, rebuke, and all Yisrael are responsible. You try to get them back, right? But 100%. I'm talking about let's say within the box, because in Judaism there are principles given to Moshe Har Sinai, and every generation the Rabbanim have to take the principles and apply them to that generation. So I'm always asked all the time, does Jewish law change? So then I ask them, I said, it depends what you mean. So then I usually get cognitive dissonance, and I say, what do you mean by that? So I say, well, it depends. If you mean that, if you ask me one question now, and the same question you asked me 300 years ago, then yeah, halacha can change. I might give you a different answer today that I gave 300 years ago. If you're asking me if the principles change, then certainly the principles. I'll just give one example of what I mean. It's the example I like giving is the case of the Torah tells us that a Kohen can't go to a cemetery, and the Torah says Amora Kohanim b'nei Aaron. The Torah tells us it only applies to the male Kohanim and not to the women Kohen. To the commentators have an interesting question. What about a wife of a Kohen? A wife of a Kohen, so there's no question. She's allowed to go to a cemetery. The question is, what about a pregnant wife of a Kohen? The wife is pregnant, and so the question is, so maybe she has a male fetus. So the question is, can she go to a cemetery or not? So the Rokeach, one of the earliest persons to deal with it, he writes, it's permitted based on the following principle. There's a principle in halacha. What do you do when you have a doubt? Safek daraisa l'chumra. A doubt regarding a biblical law was strict on. A doubt regarding a rabbinic law was lenient on. And a double doubt, a sex sveka, we're lenient on. So he says we have a double doubt here. One doubt is maybe it's a male, maybe it's a female. We don't know what's inside. And secondly, even if it was a male, unfortunately, there's no guarantee that the baby's going to make it to fruition. So, and if it might be a nefo, which is someone who doesn't make it. If you have a based on the double doubt, he says a wife of a Kohen, a pregnant wife, can go to a cemetery. So it comes along, that was a couple hundred years ago. So now we know with modern technology, there's something called the sonogram. There are different tests that you could take. Let's assume that the tests are accurate. They are pretty accurate. Let's assume halakhically we accept them. Or if you don't, or a Navi tells you that you're having a boy or a girl. Let's say you know for sure that it's going to happen. So then there's a change to halacha on that. So therefore, based on the rokeach, so then we have to go back. There's only one doubt now. We know it's the boy. It's only one doubt. So then we go back to the first principle. Savik daraisa l'chumra. So then we come out then, there's only one doubt and you should be strict. It's a whole separate topic why you might be able to be lenient anyway. But the example is if somebody asked me that question 100 years ago, I'd say it's permitted. But perhaps if a woman came, I took a sign, or I know it's a boy, So therefore, the halacha works with principles. You apply it to that society, and then you come out with different conclusions. It doesn't have to be. Different ritual questions are going to be the same, like whether the chicken's kosher or not. That's not going to change. But all the questions have to do with technology, social reality changes, all these questions. Shaving or other things like that has a lot to do with the technology, and therefore, that's going to change. But 100%, when we talk about when the Rambam, and there's a different type of balance. It's obviously halachic balance is within the halachic system. You're following it. Obviously, no one's perfect. We make mistakes, but there is no. I was strict on this issue. Let me go. I'm going to make it up, and I'm going to go have go to the treif restaurant now because I ate everything in the sukkah. That's not balance. That's an incorrect balance because one has nothing to do with the other. In other words, then don't eat in the sukkah, then eat in the house the water and chips. But and of course there's emotional balance. Then that's where Ben comes in. You go to a psychologist, a psychiatrist. But in terms of emotionally, you have to be balanced in life as well, and we have to be able to combine those factors. Just to summarize, so we started off. We discussed.
Sounds like the rabbis have like borderline disorder. It's either one way or the other way.
Right, no, that's why in terms of if you take in all the pictures, you'll see. So just to summarize, and I'll take questions if you want. So we discussed the two people who are called Tzaddik, Noach and Yosef, and they both sustained the world. And how do we know that? Because we say in Asher, we don't have that opportunity to usually to physically sustain a whole world, but each person is considered a whole world. We do chesed to one person, we save one person, it's like saving the whole world, and similarly murdering someone. And we went into the difference between tzedakah and chesed. Ultimately, tzedakah is result-oriented as long as the person is being helped. That's the bottom line, as opposed to chesed, where it makes you a better person. I'm going ahead, I want to do chesed because of the impact it has on me. You're a different person. Every time you do a good deed, it has an impact on you. And then we went into the concept of balance in terms of the different examples, but whatever it is when we're doing, obviously, whether it's chesed, you can't do chesed 100% of the day. You have to be able to function and fit in. And we discussed the different aspects of chesed, examples in the Rambam, the golden path. The children don't have balance. That's why they're not considered bardas. The hadas was mishulas because it's the hadas shota. It doesn't have the proper balance, and therefore that's why we see the different rabbis in the Gemara. When it came to sukkah, they were strict, but it came to fasting, they were lenient. And the person has to have a balance in life, and that's what the Mishnahs give an example. That certain, and they're both acceptable. And then the other explanation was that the cause of the destruction of the temple was sinas chinam, and people not accepting the other person's viewpoint. You're too frum, you're too modern, whatever the things we hear today all the time. But within Judaism, obviously within the box, there's a very big acceptable box, and then we have to learn to tolerate other opinions. Of course, it gets back to the extremism because it's a lot easier to tolerate other people if you realize they are following halacha. But if you don't really know that much, and you're just hearing what someone else told you, and you don't know the difference between a chumrah and a din deraisa, then obviously it's going to, might lead you. So I found that the more you know, it's a lot easier to have tolerance because you realize that there are many different views. For many reasons, the more you know, you realize that it's acceptable view because that's fine. You could drink the water in or out of the sukkah. There's no enough to scream at someone who's not. And similarly, when you get older in life also, you realize as well, in terms of the concept, balance, and it doesn't have to be, the quick fix right away. And that was the lesson that these rabbis are giving us the solution. If the cause was sinas chinam, they gave an example where different rabbis follow both opinions and they live in unity. And that's what that was the lesson. We see, and we'll see it throughout the whole Torah, but we'll see it throughout Sefer Bereshis, this concept as well. Parashas Noach, Perek Test, the 9th Perek. The Torah tells us, Vayu bnei Noach hayotzim ha'teva shein cham vayapes. Noach's kids who came out of the ark, And what did Noach do when he came out of the ark? Vayachal Noach ish adama vayita keramid. Noach, when he came out of the ark, he planted a vineyard. There's a famous medrash, a medrash Tanchum, I believe, that quotes regarding Noach planting a vineyard. The Malach, the Satan, came down to Noach and said he saw great ideas with a vineyard, making wine, getting people drunk. So he said, let's make a pact. And they made a pact together, and they slaughtered 4 animals. A lamb, a lion, a monkey, and a pig. Why did they slaughter 4 animals, and why in that order? So our rabbis explain the dangers of drinking. Chazal are well aware of the dangers of being intoxicated, getting drunk driving. Because Chazal tell us that you drink a little bit of surplus, a little bit extra wine, you become as sleepy as a lamb. You drink a little more to the excess, you become as fearless as a lion. You drink a little more to the excess, you start jumping around like a monkey. And you drink totally to the excess, you start acting like a pig, throwing up, vomiting, etc. And as Chazal tell us, one of the reasons why wine is red is because it leads to bloodshed. A person's embarrassed, their face turns red, they're embarrassed when they find out what they did after and when they were drunk. So we see Chazal are well aware of the dangers of wine. And yet every Friday night, every Yantif, every Simcha, Chazal will koveya a bracha al yayin. And that is basically the yesod of Judaism, that everything in moderation, that there was nothing wrong with drinking. In fact, Chazal tell us the whole purpose of why wine was created was l'nachem es ha'avel, is to comfort the mourner. So it makes sense if the person loses a loved one, they're a little down. So therefore it's okay to have a little drink to lighten you up, stop the stress a little bit. But of course, not to get drunk. That many people who don't know how to deal with tragedy, they totally just get blasted, get drunk. You see people have, in a shiva, they're just totally drinking, they can't produce. In other words, there's nothing wrong with drinking, but it's everything in moderation, and that was the whole purpose of it. In fact, Chazal tell us, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, in Nigmar Hadin, the 6th parak, that when they used to take him to Mises' space, into the Beis HaSkila, to be stoned, so one of the procedures are, you give them a little bit to drink. You give them little spices, in order to take their mind off, and not that they should know enough that they can't do tshuva, but they should know at least that the mental anguish shouldn't be so bad. Like I remember many years ago, when I went to visit Alcatraz, that's out in San Francisco in California, and I was taking the tour, and one of the things I remember is Alcatraz is known for treating prisoners properly, or they're not known for the liberal expression of it. So basically it was known, that was one of the reasons it was closed down, a lot of torture, other things, they mistreated the criminals. So when they were interviewing different criminals, what was the worst part of Alcatraz? You expect them to say, I was put in the hole, in the dungeon, I got beat up, and some probably did say that, but the one I remember is that a person said, you know what the worst part of Alcatraz was? I was sitting in my cell or on the island, and on a nice sunny day you could look across and see San Francisco. You could see people on the beach having a great time, running around. He said that was the hardest part for me, the mental anguish, knowing I'm stuck in this hole the rest of my life and I'm not going to get any freedom. So we see Chazal well aware of mental distress as well. In fact, when something is permitted for pikuach nefesh, pikuach nefesh, when one's life is in danger, it overrides all the commandments except the big 3. to worship idols, to commit adultery, and to murder someone. But save the big three. B'sham when it's Shabbos, better to machal one Shabbos, better to violate one sin, so you'll be able to do mitzvahs the rest of your life. In fact, that's a discussion in terms of the Rashba talks about, could you machal Shabbos to save someone who was just kidnapped by missionaries. So the Beis Yosef writes over there that yes, you can, because based on this principle that better to violate Shabbos once so these people could be able to keep mitzvahs. Of course the Chiddush is here, you could violate Shabbos here to save, so other people could do mitzvahs. So we see from here the concept of psychological, not this physical harm, but in the halacha, psychological issues are taken into account as well. So that's what the purpose of wine was, to menachem es avelim, and therefore, like everything in life, it's what you do with it. There's nothing wrong with Noach planting a vineyard. It was getting drunk was the problem, drinking too much. And that's the famous Rambam. The Rambam writes in the Shmona Prakim, the Rambam writes, the golden path is the middle path. All extremes are bad. And he explains that the only time you do an extreme if you have a sickness. If you're healthy, you don't do extremes. So he gives an example of a reed. It's bent all the way to the left, and you want to get it back to the middle. If you just bend it to the middle, eventually come back to the left. If you bend it all the way to the right, so if you bend it too far right, it's going to break. But if you bend it a little bit to the right, eventually you come back to the middle. So when you have a sickness, sometimes you need an extreme to get back to the middle. But all healthy people don't need extremes. Like for instance, someone who has an infection, they need antibiotic. So they take antibiotic and they get better. So a person say, you know what, this person who was sick took antibiotic and feels great now. How much more so? I'm healthy. So if I take antibiotic, how much better am I going to feel? So obviously we know it's not true. Different medicines are to fill a deficiency you have in your body. If you don't have that deficiency, taking this medication at best would be neutral. In fact, it might even be negative. So we see the Rambam writes the golden path is the middle path, and as Rav Selevan explains, it doesn't mean that every issue have to be in the middle of the road. You could be passionate about Eretz Yisrael, about tzedakah, this charity, Talmud Torah. There are a lot of good things to be passionate about. But overall, in the big picture, a person has to have a balance in life. And in fact, that's why the Rav Selevan explained that a katan, someone under 13 is allowed bardas, or a katana, a woman under 12, isn't considered someone with das. Api halacha. Why not? So the Rabbi explained, because we know if you take especially a little child, when they're happy or they're sad, it's usually they're into it 100%. There's no in between. If they're playing with their toys, their blocks, their dolls, whatever they're playing with, then they're in heaven. There's not a worry in the world. They're the happiest person around. Even though there might be other things going on that aren't so happy. And similarly, if someone takes away your toy or you lose something, the fact that you have everything else that's irrelevant, right now all you know is to cry. So that's because a katan or katana allow b'nei das, because they don't have balance in life. They have no perspective. All they do is they act emotionally. They just react to what any event happens. That's what they discuss. So a gadol, an adult, is supposed to have the ability to make a judgment call, to see the big picture and go ahead and see, wait a second, okay, so I don't have this, but overall I have a roof over my head, I have food on the table, or this is good in my life. The ability of an adult is to have that appropriate balance. In fact, that's why Rav Selevan explained when the Gemara in Sukkah talks about hadassim, so it have to be meshuash. All three of the myrtles have to come out from the same branch, from the same line, similar place of close proximity. So, and if it's And if it's not a hadas mishulish, so it's not a kosher hadas. In fact, there's a famous Rav Chaim that maybe it's not even a hadas, but keeping the lumdus aside, it's not a kosher hadas if it's not mishulish. So the Gemara has an expression, it calls it a hadas shota, a psychotic hadas. So what do you mean a crazy hadas? So that's what Rav Selevan explained, is because it means it has an imbalance. It's crazy that if it doesn't go, if it doesn't come out from a balanced approach, so therefore you're a hadas shota, and that's what Chazal are teaching us, that in life a person has to have a balanced approach. The Rambam, the Shviel Hazav, and anything in life, that's what extremists do. Extremists, they take on a specific point, it could be a good point, and they ignore all the whole big picture, and that's why they're extremists. But in Judaism, they got to take the full view. So, Vayachol Noach planted a vineyard. There was nothing wrong because the whole world was destroyed. You're coming back. It's very hard now. You're rebuilding. However, everything in moderation, as Chazal tell us, it created wine so you could have it at the house of mourner. In fact, that's the halacha. In fact, some bring down you should even have baso v'yayin, and you should have meat also. You have a suda chashuva, but even if you're not going to have meat at a suda's havra, a meal of condolence, you should definitely have wine, because the whole purpose of wine is to comfort the mourner, and that's the lesson we learn from Noach. And in Judaism, that all extremes are bad, we have to take, as the Rambam says, the Shviel Hazav, the middle road. The Torah, at the end of Parashas Noach, deals with the story when Noach came out of the Teva and got drunk, so he was left. It says, the pasuk says, "Vayarcham avi Canaan es erbes aviv." They saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers. And then so the father was naked. So what happens? Vayikach sham v'yafes es hasimla v'yasimu al Shem shneim. So basically, it says Shem and Yefes went ahead and covered up the father. They didn't look, as Rashi points out. So Rashi is bothered by the language. It says Vayikach Shem v'Yefes. That is, Vayikach is Lashon Yochid, is individual, and we're talking about two people, Shem and Yefes. So why is it Shem Vayichlu? So from here, Rashi quotes from the Chazal. What do we see from here? That Shem, he was the tzaddik, he took the initiative. And therefore, Rashi says, therefore, because he took the initiative, his descendants were rewarded with the mitzvah of tzitzis, wearing the four-corner garment with the strings. And Yefes, who was also involved in the mitzvah, so his descendants were rewarded. Later on, the pasuk says in Yechezkel, with burial in Eretz Yisrael. And Cham was punished. So the question the Mefarshim are bothered by is, what was Rashi getting at here? What's the connection? What is Chazal connecting the mitzvah of tzitzis and the mitzvah of kfura to the act of what Shem and Yafes did? So there's a famous pshat they say over b'shem Rav Soloveitchik. I heard it many times from Rav Hershel Schachter. I'm not sure if he has it I heard it from on different shiurim. It might be printed up as well in one of his svarim. But Rav Soloveitchik explained this is the whole ethics versus etiquette. I don't know, debate, issue, but there's a big difference. You know, we live in America, politically correct, doing the ethics, etiquette. And ethics, basically, the Rav Soloveitchik explained, is that there are two different principles here. Ethics makes us obligated that no matter what the situation is, we do the right thing. Not because anyone's looking, not when anyone's around. I could be alone in the room, alone anywhere. It doesn't make a difference. Ethics demands I always do the right thing. And therefore, the context might decide what the right thing is, but you have to do the right thing. While etiquette's more in a social setting, that when, in terms of how people are going to perceive it. But if you're alone, like what's the difference? What's the difference? You eat with a fork and a knife. Just use your hands. Like there's no one around. So ethics is doing the right thing all the time. Etiquette is more the social norms, politically correct, doing what the society does. So Rav Soloveitchik explained shame was not concerned with etiquette, he was concerned with ethics. And therefore, when he learned his father was being embarrassed, debased in the tent, he was drunk, he was naked, ethics demand that I do something. And right away, shame went ahead and covered him. He covered up his father so people couldn't see him naked. However, Rav Soloveitchik explains Yefes wasn't a man of ethics, he was a man of etiquette. And therefore, big deal, inside the tent, he's unclothed, no one knows what's the difference. However, etiquette, once he saw his brother doing it, shame took the initiative, so therefore he wasn't going to stand by idly. Etiquette demands that she help his brother, and he went ahead and he helped his brother. So therefore, Rav Soloveitchik explains that's the connection with the Midah Keneged Midah. That it says shame got the mitzvah of tzitzis, and Yefes got the mitzvah of klura later on. What does the mitzvah of tzitzis represent? So there's a pasuk or isem also, you should see your tzitzis, and we don't necessarily assume it means that you have to wear your tzitzis out. It's a discussion in the Rishonim, but the Magen Avram quotes from the Arizal that even though, based on Kabbalah, even though one could wear the tzitzis out, it's a whole discussion where in or out, but the Magen Avram writes, even though in Chazal say there are different places in Kabbalah, there's just that the actual baggage should be worn under you inside, under your shirt, but the strings, the tzitzis, you could leave out. So therefore, that was representative, hidden inside, that shame didn't care about perception. He did the right thing no matter what. No one sees. Your tzitzis are underneath. The becket is inside. That, in fact, also maybe that way we can reconcile later on. It says that Avraham, we learn now later on, we'll get into that there was zocha to the mitzvah of tzitzis. All the mitzvah of tzitzis were given here. So perhaps here by Yefes was the beged, or here by Shem was the beged, and later on by Avram, the chut was the strings of the tzitzis. But either way, so that's what Rav Soloveitchik explains, that Shem, who is governed by ethics, so he, no matter what, do the right thing. I'm wearing my tzitzis under my shirt. No one knows if I'm wearing tzitzis. I'm doing it because that's what I should be doing. But Yefes was only interested in helping out his father. No, what's the big deal? No one's there. But once his brother was helping, social norms demanded I help my brother. So too over here, by Kfur as well, that we don't, even though Pi Halacha, we have a mitzvah, perhaps a mitzvah deraisa of Kfura Kavatik Pereno, but let's say without the mitzvah deraisa of Kfura, like what do people bury? Why do non-Jews bury? Not because it's an obligation. It's covered up riyas. You don't want to leave your parents or your family members just lying around on the ground eating by vultures. So etiquette demands that you bury them. It's not from an ethical, necessarily, or moral obligation. In Judaism, we do it from a Torah obligation as well. So tzitzis is hidden. That represents ethics. You do the right thing all the time, even when people aren't listening, people aren't looking. But when it came to Yef, it's all about looks, externals. So therefore he was given the mitzvah of kfur, which is only an etiquette thing. It's the social norms. And in fact, that's why they point out there when Lady Di was killed in an accident many years ago, there are many people making comparisons between Lady Di and Lady Teresa, or Mother Teresa, in terms of, because Lady Di was always involved. They showed her on the cameras doing chesed work among, on these third world countries. And they were discussing like who was better. So you can discuss who was better, who was not. It's God's department. But the difference was, at least Mother Teresa was doing it even when no one's around. She did it all the time. Lady Di, you always saw her on the cameras. Who knows what it would have been? I'm not saying she wouldn't have been, but you don't know. If it's only if a person is doing something for social norms, etiquette, you're not going to be able to tell the real behavior. Like as Rav Selevan used to point out, these same brilliant philosophers who were talking about the importance of it, etc., when the political climate changed in Nazi Germany, they were the first ones to all of a sudden make the philosophy that the Jews should be killed as well. As the Torah tells us, Rak ein yiras Hashem b'makam hazeh. There's no fear of God in this place. If it's not judged by a moral obligation, then you're even cautious for a tzricha. And therefore that's the difference between shame and yefes, ethics versus etiquette. And even though we're not against etiquette, but etiquette's only good if you have the ethics. And that's why the pasuk says, Yafto kim yefes b'yishkom always shame. When will Yefet be enlarged? When are the externals important? As long as in the tense of shame, as long as you're building on Torah principles, then etiquette is also important. But if all you have is etiquette and you don't have ethics, so then it's not going to be worth much. So that's the famous explanation from Rav Soloveitchik on the connection between shame and Yefet and the reward of sitters versus burial. This to conclude is another pshat from the Aznayim with Torah. Rav Sorotskin, who says differently, that what's the connection? He says, we know shame was the righteous when he went out and initiated the act. So shame represents chiyas, his lavas, excitement for the mitzvah. He was alive, he was doing it. Tzitzis, that's why we even put, when we go into a cemetery, we hide the tzitzis. Yefes is went along with it. He was lacking, therefore he was given the mitzvah of kvura. You're dead, that's why the famous story with the tells the Rav, I think, in tells the yeshiva bachurim, they're upset about the food, so one day they were going to make a protest. They weren't going to ask any questions in Shir, because tells, it's always back and forth learning, so everyone just sat there with the Gemara open, and so the tells the Rav said, what is this, a beis akfaros? Torah is about chiyas, so shame represents chiyas, his lavas, excitement about a mitzvah. Yeah, if it's okay, I'll go along. That's kvura, basically you're dead inside, but you go along, and that's how some explain. That's the pshat also why you can't have yeast on the mizbeach, on the karbanos. Why not? So the commentators explain, because how does yeast work? Very slowly. It causes you to rise slowly. And when it comes to avodas Hashem, you got to do there with reasons. Reason maktimin mitzvahs, and that's what we learn from shame. We learn shame in the attitude. The attitude is we have to do things. We have to be excited about them. Like lech lecha Avram, it was only because lecha lahanascha. You have to. If you don't think you're going to get benefit from it, then you're not going to be excited about it. Avram can never be successful if he didn't realize. That's what the Iglei Tal writes in his introduction. People think learning Torah Lashma is, I hate this, it's so boring, but I'll do it anyway. It's a Kutzker said, if you don't have cheshek, learn without cheshek. That's a good thing to do, but the ultimate highest level of learning Lashma is the geschmack, is the enjoyment of learning. And the learning is only going to be, if you're learning Torah like you're shaking a lulav and esrog, it's not going to work. You have to have that inner hislavis, and that's what we learn from shame. That's the Jewish value. The Jewish value is the desire. So we have the two different pshatim. We have Rav Soloveitchik, ethics versus etiquette. Ethics is shame, doing the right thing all the time, tzitzis under your shirt. While Yefet was more, and that's the external, the Greeks. They worship the body outside, but they were lacking on the inside. And the only time it's meaningful if it's Yishkom Eloi Shame, and that's where Sorotskin added as well, that shame represents the excitement. You can't be like Yefet, okay, I'll go along, It's doing things by rote. There's no feeling. The ultimate in mitzvahs is, in Talmud Torah and all mitzvahs is b'slavis, and that's what we learn out from Shem. Not only what he did, but in the manner he did it, his attitude, as in taking the initiative.